Audit and Governance Committee. My name is Graham Bell. I am one of the independent members and committee chair. We do have some membership changes since the last meeting, so it may be worth just whipping around the screen just to do brief introductions. But I just wanted to start with Kevin and then going on to Joanna, if that's okay. So Kevin, as the other independent member, would you like to?
Yes, Kevin Brady, independent member of the Audit and Governance Committee.
Joanna, hi. Over to you. You're on mute, Joanna. Joanna, you're on mute, I think. Sorry. You're still on mute. There
yes, no, I've managed to turn the microphone off.
Yeah, well done. Well done.
Hello. Right, I am Councillor Baker Rogers. I'm a councillor with Rotherham, and I chair the Audit Committee.
Grand, welcome. Thank you, Joanna. We are waiting for Councillor Hussain, I think, still at this point, so we'll just carry on with. Can I go to you next, Paul?
Yeah, Paul Kelly, the Finance Director at TFN, and I suppose the primary contact from the officers' side in relation to the committee. So any questions or concerns that you'd have in relation to anything, I suppose, financially related, or anything related, because it also captures governance, please use me as an initial point of contact, or Julie as a monitoring officer.
Okay, great link to Julie. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie Openshaw, I'm the Head of Legal and Monitoring Officer with Transport for the North.
Okay. Stephen?
Good afternoon, I'm Stephen Hipwell. I'm the Head of HR at Transport for the North, responsible for everything people management related, as well as health and safety and learning development.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Daniel, I think you're next on my list.
Good afternoon, Danny Chapman. I'm the IT and Information Manager at Transport for the North.
Thanks, Danny. And Daniel W. Let's do it that way around.
No problem. Thanks, Chair. I'm Daniel Watson. I'm a director with Mazars, the external auditor. I'm taking over from Karen Murray as the engagement lead for the audit going forwards from 22-23.
So this is your first.
It's my first year, yes.
Graham, thank you. Daniela.
I'm Daniela Gallachera-Smith. I'm the risk manager for TFN. Welcome.
Grand, thank you. I've got James on my list next, isn't
it? Good afternoon. My name is James Mills. I'm Head of Communications and Engagement for Transport for the North.
Thank you, James. And Kieran.
I'm Kieran Barker from RSM, and I'll be providing the internal update in this meeting today.
Grand, thanks, Kieran. Gary, I think you're next, and then Andrea. You're on mute, Gary. So,
yeah, always starts. Yeah, afternoon everyone. I'm Gary Rich and I'm the Democratic Services Officer for Transport for the North.
And Andrea.
I'm Andrea Shepherd. I'm an Executive Assistant for Transport for the North and the Administrator for this meeting.
Grand, thank you. So are we still shy of Councillor Hussain? Is that the status at the moment?
Yes.
Okay. Have we missed anybody, Andrea, in terms of intros? Everybody?
No, we've got everybody.
Grand. So is everybody happy to carry on? Paul, you have to carry on the basis that this isn't necessarily core?
Yeah, because again, I can advise Councillor Hussain under delegated powers separately, if that's okay with the committee.
Yeah, Kevin, you okay with that? Joanna? Grand.
I think
Councillor Hussain.
I think that Councillor Hussain is trying to join.
He's joined the meeting, yes. Thank you.
Councillor Hussain, welcome.
Hi, you okay?
Grand, bless you, thank you. Yes, we've just spent a minute or two doing introductions, so your entrance was quite timely, actually. So, as a new member of the committee, can I A, say welcome, and B, invite you to just do a very quick intro for everybody else.
Yeah, my name's Shaukat Hussain. I'm from Blackburn. And basically that's it. I'm an assistant exec member for the environment department.
Grand, thank you. Welcome. Right, we are all here, so that makes me feel much more complete and comfortable, I think. Excellent. Well, having got welcomes out the way, in terms of declarations of interest, if anybody has anything which any member of the committee has anything which they would like to declare specifically in relation to things that are on the agenda, now is your opportunity to do that. Otherwise, I think we can go straight into the minutes from the last meeting, if that's okay. We have been through offline the detail of the minutes, so hopefully we've managed to pick up things that were pointed out as requiring attention, so we can give an update as well as confirm the accuracy of the minutes as part of this session. And the first point that we talked about at the last meeting was membership of the committee, and obviously a number of things have changed since that session. So I don't know, Paul or Julie, whether one of you would like to just bring the committee up to date in terms of progress, movements, timescales, etc.
Shall I just speak briefly to that, Chair, if you're happy with that?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
So, as you know, we have 6 seats for elected members on the committee. We have 5 of those filled at the moment. Not all of those are here today. We still have 1 vacancy on there, but we do have 5 members filling those seats, so that going forward, hopefully we'll be much more robust in terms of achieving quorum at meetings. In terms of the independent members, we've got 2 vacancies for those at the moment, and Paul and I have followed a process which we've also including Graham Bell as independent chair in. And as a result of that, following a recruitment process, we've got 2 names which we intend to take forward to board. We can't disclose who those are at the moment, but we'll disclose those in the board report, who will be recommending to the board to appoint in September. So from the December meeting of this committee, we should have 4 independent members in place and 5 out of the 6 elected members. So hopefully we should have a much larger attendance at the meetings. Hope that helps, Chair.
Yeah, grand. Thank you. That was, as Julie made reference to there, I was party to most of the interviews for the independent members. Really interesting process. I thought getting various external perspectives, what are effectively external perspectives on committee work. And I've got a couple of things that I want to share as part of that, but I'll bring those up perhaps when we talk to the governance statement towards the end of the meeting. So I'll have to remind myself to mention those. Great, thank you. I don't know if anybody else has anything they wish to add in terms of membership, but that was a key point of previous meeting, and it's obviously key for us going forward. If everybody's okay with that. Minutes from the meeting before, I think, were clear, accurate. I don't think there was anything outstanding from that. Quarterly operating report from last time, if anybody has anything to add to that section.
Chair, we picked the quarterly operating report up as an agenda item. If that's, I think quite a lot of the subject matter gets picked up as agenda items. So
yes, yeah,
perhaps that will be an opportunity to pick this up there.
I know corporate risk review. Obviously, we have risk on the agenda for this meeting as well. But if there is anything outstanding in that section, over and above the points that are already resolved on there. And we have Treasury Management Strategy Report. Then we have Internal Audit. And then External audit, I'm not aware of anything outstanding in either of those two sections that we can't bring up later in the meeting. The annual governance statement review, again, that's part of the agenda item towards the end of the meeting. And then obviously the date of this meeting was carried over from the cancellation in July. So I know that, as I said earlier, we've been through the minutes offline, but if anybody has anything that they wish to add at this point in terms of accuracy or completeness, or points not resolved, then please shout. Okay, I think we'll take those as approved. Thank you very much. Daniela, I think you are next up with an update on all matters risk.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Graham. Afternoon, everyone. So there's three areas that I'd like to focus on today in terms of risk management. The first one is update to the corporate risk register. The second one being the update to the TFN assurance model, and then also the scheduled risk deep dive that's planned. So in terms of the corporate risk register, just taking the report as read, but just wanted to highlight a few areas really in terms of our sort of TFN's current risk environment, emerging risks, and some of those key changes that have been made. So you'll notice that there has been a change to the report format of the corporate risk register, and now you'll see a two-page dashboard which shows the risk summary of the risk description of all 21 risks to give us more visibility of those, and then we can go into the detail down below in terms of those mitigation actions or controls that are in place there. Now, in terms of the risk environment that we currently face, we're closely monitoring the funding risk based on the fiscal environment, including the cost of inflation. We're also currently monitoring the risks in relation to the TFN offer, which you'll have heard mentioned before as a centre of excellence, and ensuring that TFN continues to engage with partners across the region to fully scope out that offer that we can bring to support local transport planning. Another area that we're sort of considering at the moment is TFN are due to relocate to a new head office in September, and we're looking at risks and actions that are being considered in relation to the office move, and a working group has been established to discuss progress with the move. And also we continue to monitor the political environment, particularly with the upcoming general election at some point next year, and how that may impact on the delivery of TFN's objectives. Some of the key changes that we've made to the corporate risk register this time round. In February, we had 2 new directors join TFN, and now we've updated and transferred the risk ownerships over to them. We've identified 2 new risks, one which is linked to TFN's business continuity during the office move, and the other one links to the TFN offer and resources. We have a number of risks, which again is included in the detail, that have reduced in probability or closed due to TFN's current environment that we face. And these have been updated along with the business plan and the key milestones for 23-24. In terms of the risk which relates to recruitment and retention of staff, which I'll go into a little bit more detail on later on when we look at this as part of the deep dive. We've reduced the probability due to turnover has reduced now that TFN has a greater certainty in terms of its funding allocation, and the recruitment process is progressing. I don't think I've anything else major to say in terms of updates to the corporate risk register. However, happy to take any questions or comments on that.
Thanks, Daniela. Can I invite other members of the committee to pose any questions? Kevin, perhaps beginning with you.
I didn't have a question on the risk register update. I'm okay with that. I've got a question on the assurance framework and the 3 lines of defence, but I'll come back to that.
We'll move on to that next, Kevin.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. Joanna, did you have anything?
Yes, Chair, I do. Now, I know this is my first meeting, so all this may well have been covered, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You include in your risks the cost of inflation. Is that the same as including the risk associated with the cost of living crisis? Have we looked at the risk that the war in Ukraine may present? And I had a third point. Can you just answer those 2 points and I'll come back with my third point? Sorry.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. When we've looked at the funding risks at functional level and at corporate level, we've looked at it in terms of, and the way it's assessed takes into account the cost of inflation and the cost of living as well, and the war in Ukraine and the environment that risks are brought out is also thought of as part of that process. So risks are assessed with that in mind, and that's how, for example, the funding risk that we currently have on the corporate level register is our highest risk at the moment, and that's why it's a red at very high, even though we have a 2-year funding allocation confirmed. There is still various things that can affect that going forward in medium to longer term in terms of those costs.
Okay, and I've now remembered my third point. What about the risks associated with rail operators losing the franchise and being taken back into public ownership? Thank you.
Yeah, so we do have the rail risks, the corporate risks on the register in terms of the operations, which is, from memory, hold on, let me just go to, can you, on the dashboard, we do have a number of rail risks, one that links to rail reform, which is 310. And the second one is, we also have the risk around the demands, so the travel demands on COVID, which is 309, and the other one is around MPR. So the one around reduced role in rail industry, which is the second highest, and around rail reform, I think is the one that Joanna, you're currently talking about, which is 310. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the detail in terms of the actions that we have around that risk at the moment as well. We've also got a deep dive that's scheduled for that risk, September 15th September. So that risk will be coming to sort of Audit and Governance Committee with a representative from Rail to discuss that in further detail. If that helps.
Yes, it does. And can I just ask about climate change?
Climate change. So in terms of what we have on the register at the moment, we have the decarbonisation risk, which is, from memory, can't remember the number. Again, it's on the dashboard. I'll just have a quick look.
Danielle, if I could just step in as well, just to sort of give a bit more sort of feedback there, is Joanna, as well as the corporate risk, there's a whole range of functional risks also that are managed. So decarbonisation is very much managed at a functional level. What we capture at a corporate level is the things that we believe would affect the business of the, from a wider perspective. So there's a whole range of risks managed by the operating board, which is the executive team, at functional level as well. So and at some point we can take you through that as well, which will give you a sort of richness of what and how its risk is managed at functional level as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your answers, most appreciated.
Okay. Joanna, the number of that one was 299, if that helps, just to see a bit more detail around. Okay, great. Is there any more questions on that, or should we move on?
I just wanted to give Shortcut an opportunity. Councillor Hussain, I can't see you on my list. Oh, you are still there. Sorry, bless you. You may have muted. No, still can't hear you, sorry. Try again.
I'm not muted.
We can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Oh, I don't know what happened then.
Sorry.
All right. No, I've no questions. Thanks.
Okay, bless you. Thank you. Thank you. I had a couple of points. One of which I shared with Paul offline, which was the significance that we attach to cyber risk. My immediate reaction, looking at the listing, looking at the dashboard, I was a little surprised with how low, my word, not yours, how low down the list cyber appeared to be. And I get the point about the relative importance of cyber, but I do always think that cyber risk is a little bit like crossing a busy road. The fact that you haven't been hit by a car yet isn't really a measure of success. So I just urge TFN to constantly reconsider their position in respect of that risk. I'm not trying to challenge the assessment as is, obviously, but it is a perennial. I read a report yesterday from UK Electoral Commission. They discovered that they'd been attacked in 2022. It was only by investigating it that they'd found that the actual attack took place a year earlier. And this is several years after the Russians disrupted the US election. You would have thought perhaps they would have considered themselves an obvious target. Maybe they did. Yeah, it's an ever-changing and ever-present risk, I suppose. The other point that I mentioned. Sorry, Joanna, you wanted to come in on that.
No, I've just got another question, so please carry on and finish your point.
Great. Yeah, the only other point I was going to raise was the business continuity challenge of moving office. I'm just conscious that what we're seeing here might have been penned some weeks ago, and just whether there was an update in terms of that, because it's obviously quite a near term risk, and just to get some assurance that everything is going to plan, I guess.
Yeah, so in terms of that, Graham, like you say, it was done a few weeks ago, and the working group is still ongoing, and it's established, and it's going through progress, and the move is due to, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, take place at some point towards the beginning to mid-September. So we've got a number of risks highlighted at functional level that we've identified with appropriate mitigations actions for those, and then we've also got the corporate risk around disruption as well.
Okay, good, thank you.
I think also I think sometimes moving an office is like moving a house. It can be classed as more of an opportunity, because it's amazing how much of a clear out you do. I mean, we've accumulated a lot of I suppose legacy in the 5 years to date, and it's quite nice to force ourselves to make the decision on it and become a lot more a lot streamlined, a lot leaner, far more remote, in terms of paperless working as well. So it's I agree, Graham. It is a risk, but also it's an opportunity to clear out the cupboards, for want of a better phrase.
Perfectly good phrase. I like it. Joanna, back to you, I think. Thank you, Paul.
Hi, yes, I've now found this 299. I'd just like to know a little bit more about how this is worded. It says committed to achieving close to zero. That's a very qualitative measure. In terms of a quantitative one, have you considered a stretch target? And if so, what is it, please?
Yeah, no, we haven't, Joanna. At the moment, it is qualitative. We've not built in the quantitative into that risk itself. It is very much a qualitative view at the moment that we've took on that.
Is that something that you could perhaps ponder a little on our behalf prior to the next meeting? Then?
Yeah, we can have a think about that.
Yeah, I just think close to can mean various things to various people, can't it? No, there's no formal definition of close to. And I just think it might help if we had a quantitative stretch target for that.
Yeah.
Leave that with us, Joanna, and we'll provide you with an update to that at the next committee meeting in September.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Great, thanks, Joanna. So, Daniela, thank you for attending to our questions. I think we are probably now on to the assurance.
Okay, yes. So as part of the risk maturity audit review that was done in September, one of the management actions that came out of that was adopting an assurance model. TFN has now adopted an assurance model which consists of the 3 lines of defence. And this provides us with a guide on how responsibility should be divided and allows TFN to ensure effectiveness of controls and how that are in place and how they're managed appropriately. The risk management strategy has been updated to reflect this. And what you'll also notice in the pack is a tool that we've developed to move on to the next stage, which is how do we demonstrate those 3 lines of defence and that they're operating as effectively as they can be. So the next step really is for myself to have reviews with directors on the key risks at corporate level and look into the controls and identify how we demonstrate first line, second line and third line if it goes through the 3rd line of defence, because it may be that it would just be justifiable to go through first line and second line. And that will be done through reviews with prompt questions, for example, at first line. Are the controls effective in managing the risk? Have we got evidence that's tangible and demonstrates its effectiveness? Are the controls light? And if they are light, do mitigation actions fill the gap? And are the controls operating as intended? So there's a number of prompt questions that would be asked at that first line. And then we'd move into the second line and look at, is the control being overseen, how and where? And the third line, has the control been checked and monitored or reviewed independently? So once we've done this exercise where we review the corporate risks to ensure this is implemented and applied, we'll then look at producing a report to identify, do we feel the risks are effective, adequate or limited in terms of its assurance score? And if it is adequate or limited, what are the key gaps that we do to try and raise that assurance score, and what are the timescales and ownership for this? So we're currently going through that process now of reviewing this, and then in the hopefully by the end of October we'll have a report in place to demonstrate that. I appreciate I've run through that quite quickly. Does anyone have any sort of questions? Again, I'm assuming, I know Kevin does, and I know Graham as well has made a comment via email around the ownership of risk. And happy to incorporate that into the diagram as well, Graham, about the first lines about risk ownership and the second line being about ownership of the framework. Happy to update that, Graham, to reflect that.
Yeah, thank you. I think the other side of that ownership point is when you're thinking about the sort of mapping of assurance against the risks, it's which risks do line 1 rely on line 2 for advice and guidance? Yeah. And that's a bit of a subtlety that doesn't always jump out from models like that. But I think it's line 2 isn't just an oversight function of management. It's also the place where the business turns to for advice and challenge, expert view as well as everything else. Yeah, grand. Thank you, Kevin.
I think my question's probably been answered to some degree, but it was around where we reflect internal audit and external audit in terms of that third line of defence? And I know that this is just an example, the 916, but there isn't any reference in that one to where internal audit and or third party scrutiny or assurance would be provided. So I was just curious as to where that would play into this model. And, you know, if we look at the value for money, if we look at it through a value for money perspective, then I would have expected to see third party challenge in there, you know, at some point, and certainly in the third line, rather than just a discussion at board, which has, I suppose, at best a sort of quasi independent assurance role.
So, Kevin, in terms of that third line, that is where, you know, if we need to, we've got TFN board, the different committees we have, scrutiny committee, audit and governance. It might even be an area, I know, value for money. For example, we've got it on the plan for a review by, I think it's RSM. So that's where that would come in. I know, for example, the financial with Mazars, that's where the external assurance comes in. And also with some of the HR stuff as well, in terms of the regulations and things like that. So that's where that would be picked up.
Fine, thanks for
Hope that helps.
Yeah, that's helpful. Cheers.
Kevin, thank you. Joanna, your
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question about controls on page 36. It says in the note that all comments should be smart. If I'm reading these comments below, which is what I'm assuming these refer to me, these aren't smart. These aren't worded to be a smart target.
In terms of which comments, Joanna, are you looking at there? Is it the ones on the template page?
Yeah. So on page 36, the fourth column on is controls.
Yeah.
And there's a note that says all comments should be smart.
Yeah.
I'm presuming that it refers to the comments in this column.
Yes, it does, yeah.
Right, well, for me, they're not worded to be smart. They aren't specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, or time-based. They're quite general.
The controls are general, or the description of the description of the controls themselves, you feel, are general?
Yeah, I feel they're quite general, and I think they lack a time element, and also how would we measure them? How would we measure success? Anyway, they're just my comments. Yeah. There's no need to reply now, just something to think about maybe.
Yeah. A lot of the controls as well that we have, Joanna, they are sort of ongoing due to the nature of TFN in terms of they are in place, and they are things that we are sort of actively doing depending on when the business planning process is, and it all has a timeline, so that level of detail might not be included within the template. However, the register, if that makes sense in terms of its ongoing nature of what it is.
Well, I think maybe we should take out that reference then, saying all comments should be smart, because if we're not going to be able to make them smart because of everything that you've said, I think perhaps that should come out.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, we can update that. Thanks, Joanna. Any more questions on that, or?
Anybody else? I don't know. The councillor is saying you're still on. Oh, yes, you are. If there is anything else, any other questions on that?
Oh, there's no point. I'm just listening. It's my first meeting. I'm just getting used to it. Indeed. We'll let you off asking questions at this point. You're okay. Okay, thanks.
Grand. Super. Right. Danielle, thank you. I think we are perhaps a little later than we'd anticipated into deep dive territory, I think.
Okay, yeah. So I've shared the deep dive papers with the corporate risk that we're looking at today, which is 643, around recruitment and retention of staff. Stephen Hitwell is here to take sort of any questions really in terms of that risk, or it might be, you know, the environment of that risk and oh, sorry, Paul.
No, it's fine. I wonder if I could just take a step back though and just frame the deep dive concept is that, you know, we're not fixed as a committee as to how, you know, our agenda is not necessarily fixed. There are certain things that we have to consider and address as part of our part of the role, but there are also things that aren't. So certainly risk has been elevated from where it was maybe a year or two ago to suddenly now it's a key priority. It's probably the number one focus within this committee. Deep dives was something that I think it might have been Kevin actually that suggested that we drill down onto certain risks to give a bit more richness, because a 2-hour meeting to cover a whole risk register and lots of other matters is quite a short amount of time, and therefore if we were able to drill down on certain risks that members wanted to explore, it starts to explain the overall risk regime better and bring it to life. And I think this is the second one, is it, Daniela? The second risk that we've drilled down. We drilled down on. We did EVCI. EVCI originally, which we can share. We can share papers with the new members if they would like in terms of that. And now we're doing the retention of staff. But there's a programme that we would be reviewing, you know, deep diving a risk on each meeting. I think actually, isn't it, Daniela?
Yes, we've got one scheduled in for September, and then we I think we've got the TFN offer at the start of next year, so we might have to think about one at Christmas time. But yeah.
And going forward, any risk that members feel that they want to explore, you know, whether it could be the funding risk, it could be the sustainability risk, it could be anything. You know, we're happy to consider and build them into a programme so they are considered appropriate over a period of time. Sorry about that, Danny, if I jump in.
No, fine.
Joanna, did you want to say something at this point?
Yes, sorry. I just wanted a point of clarification. Is this deep dive the recruitment and retention of staff for Transport for the North or for this committee?
For Transport for the North.
Okay, because I was just going to make the comment. If we're talking about staff, are we going to include members in that? As in councillors?
Well, we could extend it to, but it's primarily. Obviously we're set up by an Act of Parliament to deliver a whole series of statutory duties. So the focus is very much on retaining the workforce, which is about. I mean, it actually turns out to be the main cost, which is the cost of people. So it is focusing on, I suppose, the resource that's required to do the duties that have been designated. I think certainly we could consider the member side, because again the members are important. But I think happy to talk about that offline if you want. But we haven't factored members into this
right.
Originally.
Okay, well, look, as I can see what the scope is now, because I wasn't clear on that, that's fine. But I think you might want to look at recruitment and retention of members at some point.
Yes,
might be considered as part of a wider governance deep dive as well as another way of looking at it. But yeah, good topic.
Okay, thank you.
Grand.
Thanks, Joanna.
Okay, Daniela, back to you in terms of deep dive material. Or unless
I've just noticed Kevin, have you got a question there?
No, I'm happy to wait until you've finished, Danielle.
Okay. No, that's it. So happy to. I'm hoping that people have managed to review the risk itself and the actions associated with them. I guess the first thing is, has anyone got any initial comments on that or questions for Stephen to sort of kick it off, really, I guess?
Shall I start us off, Stephen? Just as somewhere to start, and it's one of the comments that I made to Paul offline is really like the idea of deep dive, really like the subject. I think it's the context within which we think about the risk, which is particularly important for me. So, is there a bit of an overlay that you can offer in terms of TFN's current performance in respect of recruitment and retention over the recent period, whether that's improving or be helpful?
Yeah, no, sure. I think it's fair to say that TFN is in a far stronger and healthier position in terms of this particular risk than it certainly was this time last year. For committee members that have been on the committee for some period, some length of time, obviously I'm sure you'll be aware of the challenges the organisation's been through in terms of a significant period of uncertainty in terms of its role, its remit, its finances, and that did result in the need to complete a reorganisation of TFN, which was taking place through to around this time last year, and saw a number of redundancies that the organisation made, and over that period of time, the level of voluntary turnover rose to a peak around 25%, which is significantly above the average for the public sector. I think at that time it was running around about 13 to 14%. It's fair to say that the actions the organisation has taken in terms of reorganisation, reprioritisation, having certainty around its budgets and its finances, have all had a significant impact in terms of bringing the turnover level down within the organisation. For year to date, we're currently running an annual turnover figure around about 9%, which is now significantly below the public sector average, which is, as I say, around about 14-15%. I think it's fair to say that has been a result of the actions that have taken place over the last 6 to 9 months in terms of the reorganisation, the reprioritisation of objectives that's taken place. Obviously, the certainty around the budgets, but obviously that's also been supported by the wider people management framework that we've got in place. Some of those things include the review of pay and grading that we undertook over the previous year to make sure that our salaries were sort of fair and robust and competitive in the market. Continued investment in learning and development, our wellbeing programs, our leadership development programs, and the sort of wellbeing and health and wellbeing support programs that we've got in place for staff have all again had a positive impact in terms of, I believe, in stabilising the level of turnover within the organisation. Clearly, there are challenges in the market. It is quite a challenging recruitment market out there, it's particularly across certain sectors. So finance being a particular challenge, legal being a particular challenge, as well as in some of the more specialist transport roles. So effectively, ensuring we have a close eye on turnover, particularly in those areas, is important to make sure there's no emerging issues or challenges around levels of turnover, but also in terms of them being able to bring new talent into the organisation when it's required. So I think I guess I'd give that as my opening statement to say that we've moved from a period of significant challenge in terms of the uncertainty which impacted on turnover levels to a period which is far healthier and certainly running below the sector average in terms of turnover levels.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Just as an extension of that sort of scene setting, obviously retention is quite it's the ultimate lagging indicator, I guess, isn't it, in terms of you measuring something after somebody's already left, I suppose. But is there, and I think we've spoken about it previously, but is there a culture survey or an employee engagement survey or anything that provides that sort of ongoing sort of the subtlety of the shift?
Yes,
in terms of
we have previously undertaken an engagement survey that was undertaken in 2020, and another engagement survey is planned for the next quarter following the move to our new offices. that will be aligned to the best companies framework, so we can actually complete as well as internal benchmarking and external benchmarking around sort of levels of engagement. I think it goes beyond just engagement surveys, though. There's a lot of work that takes place in terms of through my team and our business partnering support to take, to understand the pulse of the organisation in terms of how individuals are feeling, how they're feeling, how they're feeling supported. I guess their general outlook in terms of how the organisation is doing. So that can be through exit questionnaires, learning and development evaluations, new starter evaluations. So there's lots of other mechanisms that we've got to understand the pulse across the business. And I think it's fair to say that the sort of the feeling across the organisation in terms of positive feeling around engagement and people feeling there's a future for them in TFN. There's certainly a significant sort of high levels of, I guess, of well-being and satisfaction that we're sort of we're sort of receiving, and through all the various informal and formal sort of feedback mechanisms we have in place across the organisation.
Grant, thank you, Stephen. Very helpful. Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Really assuring to hear your comments, Stephen, around how the organisation has shifted over the last 12 months. Because if I look back to where we were then a reducing organisational size, reducing grant funding and reducing purpose, really was a concern, I think, for this committee in terms of that recruitment and retention. So it's good to hear that the turnover rates is performing well. I guess my challenge would be around the current score and the target score, because we're still living in a degree of political uncertainty and also the sectoral uncertainty in terms of the future of TFN. So just I suppose not hugely surprised, but just mildly surprised that we've scored at our target score. I'd have thought we would still be, being mildly cautious there in terms of our ability to retain and recruit. And then I thought the actions were about right. No real issues there. But I did wonder about secondment, whether, and I do recognise that there's a lot of specialism in this field, but whether secondment would be a fallback control or action.
Yes,
if in the future, but particularly if that uncertainty is still underpinning the organisation.
Yeah, I guess all I'd add in terms of probably why the scoring has moved as it has, again, is just some of the sort of key performance indicators around the fact that successful first-time recruitment. So that was previously in the previous 12 months running at 90%. That's currently running at 96%. So despite the challenges in the market, our first-time recruitment is, figures are running at 96%. And in terms of successful probationary completion, which obviously looks at the quality of the individuals we're attracting, that in the previous 12-month period is running at 95%, and for the year to date is running at 100%. So although the market is challenging, the processes and procedures and mechanisms we have in place do appear to be continuing to be successful in terms of both the ability to recruit first time, particularly in some challenging markets, but also in terms of the quality of candidates we're attracting. So you're absolutely right. I think it's something that needs to continue to have to be closely looked at. But again, alongside, I guess, the evidence that we've got in terms of the quality and level of candidates we're able to attract to TFN. And a lot of that is, I guess, down to the fact that there is a greater level of certainty around the sort of the future role and remit for TFN, and that has a huge draw for individuals in terms of wanting to work in the sector because of the type of work and activity that individuals can get involved in if they do come to an organisation like TFN.
Thanks for that, Stephen. Really, really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Joanna.
Hi, yes, thank you. Yeah, I just wondered about a few things. You say you're going to consult with Unison. Do we need to include any other unions? In terms of competition, I was wondering about, is a measure of success not just recruiting first time, but it's having competition and having a number of candidates to actually choose from that could all potentially do that particular role. And I wanted to ask, are you going to ask anything about, do people have any health and safety concerns about where they've been working? Because I think sometimes that can influence people's views. Also, in terms of your competition, are you going to have a look at, are there any providers that our employees leave to particularly join? And if so, what are they offering maybe that we could?
Yeah, so a few things there. In terms of the first point around trade unions, TFN recognises Unison for collective bargaining purposes. So our collective bargaining is with one union, which isn't necessarily the case across other local authorities that might have a sort of a number of unions that individuals are members of. That said, obviously, if individuals want to be represented by other trade unions within any kind of people management processes, those requirements are obviously fully respected. But obviously in the main, given our sort of collective bargaining arrangements, our negotiations and consultation on an ongoing basis is generally obviously through and with Unison. In terms of sort of numbers, in terms of applications for roles, that is something we do look at and monitor. It's fair to say that the number of applicants for most roles is remained healthy, and we are getting good and strong competition in terms of when we're recruiting to most roles. It is fair to say that certain roles in some of the sectors I've described, the number of candidates we are seeing applying for roles is reduced, but I don't think we're alone. I mean, in fact, I know we're not alone in terms of seeing candidates numbers in those sectors being slightly less than what there was previously, and that's feedback from a number of sources, agencies, executive search agencies that we work with, colleagues in other local authorities. So we're not alone in that, but it's fair to say that for the vast majority of vacancies, we still continue to have healthy shortlists that are representative and not, in terms of having the diversity as well as the quality of skills. In terms of health and safety comments, we have an employee forum which allows obviously employees to raise any concerns across the whole range of issues: people management, learning and development, health and safety. And so I think we do have adequate mechanisms in place for any health and safety issues or concerns to be raised. In terms of our accident record, touch wood, we've not had any reportable accidents in each of the last in 2 years, albeit that's not necessarily the best measure around health and safety and well-being. And as I talked about earlier, we do have a comprehensive health and wellbeing programme across the organisation and an employee assistance line as well, and support service to deal with issues around mental health and stress. So again, I think the support package we've got in place to help and support around health and safety is pretty comprehensive for an organisation of our size. And I think your final point was around competition. I can't quite remember what that point was.
No, I think you've answered that first question. But okay. I just wanted to say, so are you going to talk to someone from the health and safety panel during the deep dive?
Sorry, I don't quite understand.
You said you had a health and safety forum or something like that?
We have an employee forum. What we also have, so that's part of the agenda, is around any issues around health and safety. What we also have is we have a support partner through an organisation called Ellis Whittam that acts as a specialist around health and safety compliance, and we have an annual audit that's done around health and safety by that external service provider to make sure that everything we're doing from a health and safety perspective is aligned to good and best practice.
Okay, so you will be speaking to them during the deep dive, will you, or at least reviewing that audit report?
It's in terms of the audit recommendations that come through that annual review are monitored on an annual basis. That's both with the employee forum but also in consultation with Unison.
Okay, thank you.
Grand. Thank you, Joanne. Paul.
Yeah, I just wonder whether it's. I think Stephen touched on it at the start. I think it's just important that the context of where we are. You know, Stephen said that we're in a very different place, and I think what's really important is recognising that. You know, we had a conference at the early part of the year. The Secretary of State was there. The Shadow Secretary of State was there. You know, that would never have happened 2 years ago. If anything, actually, I think Grant Shapps would have found a way of going the opposite direction, but that's just my opinion. But you know, but the fact of the matter is there was huge representation. Now, I think what TFN has become because of its work and its recognition, it's become a place that people want to join, and we're finding that people are that there's some very, very good candidates that are finding their way to our organisation now, as has been shown by the two directors that have joined in February. So, and I think also linked to that was the fact that the funding allocation has been granted for 2 years. Albeit it's flat, you know, I suppose every cloud. I'd like it to be incremental, but the dialogue is there with the department to consider the incremental changes. So everything is looking very positive, and I think that supports the environment in which recruitment and retention are both considered. So it's good, and it's funny, this got raised yesterday we have an operating board that where the directors of the organisation get together, and one of the people who've been in the organisation since its inception said he's never seen the organisation work so collaboratively in that 5-year period. So it's there's definitely a very strong feeling, and it's demonstrating itself through productivity, which is great.
Grand. Thank you, Paul. I'm just conscious I need to give Councillor Hussain the opportunity to shout out if he wishes to at this point.
No, I'm listening. I'm just interested.
Okay.
I'm just going to say, do you not do interviews when people leave? Just to get
exit interviews, yeah.
Yeah.
We do have an exit interview process. What I would say, there's no underlying or emerging trends around any specific reason that individuals are leaving the organisation. In the main, it is to move on for career development purposes. We are a relatively small organisation. Internal promotions is reasonably high. I think for the year to date, a third of vacancies have been filled through internal promotions. So we do offer quite a good level of internal career development, but we can't offer that for individuals. And as I say, the reasons people are moving on is because they've learned, developed, they've grown in their particular professions, and then they're able to move on to bigger and better things. But that's not to say that individuals that do move on don't hold and continue to hold TFN in a positive light. And we've had a number of examples where individuals have left and have come back to the organisation subsequently.
Well, you partly answered my question. Next question was that do you do some professional development for people employing?
Yeah, obviously learning development is a key part of our package. We've completed leadership development programs in the last 18 months across our senior management team and middle management team. So I think that represents around about 30% of the organisation that have been through leadership development training in the last 2 years. And obviously we do take our commitment seriously around, let's say, learning development through our annual appraisal process. In terms of all the learning development requests that we received over the last 24 months, they've been 100% delivered in full. Albeit obviously need to be mindful of the budgets that we do have available for learning development, because we do, there's only a certain amount of money for learning development alongside obviously other organisational priorities.
All right, brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Shuka. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay, thank you.
Just as one of the points that surprised me when I read the corporate risk slide 643, and obviously you can't put everything onto a single slide. It wasn't clear to me as as the audience, as the reader, where inclusivity sits in terms of a key factor in helping the organisation to attract and B, retain the right people. So I would encourage you to draw. I'm sure you've got information on it. I'm sure you look at it. You're conscious of it. I think just having it present as part of that risk narrative, I think would be helpful. I mean, I would say this, wouldn't I? But week of the 20th of November is National Older Workers Week, and I know a lot of national organisations, regional organisations, are very conscious of that group of workers, if you like, and how to draw best value from them, how to be attractive to them in terms of offering flexible working, different types of working environments, just as one example. So I just think being able to provide that narrative as part of discussing the risk, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure that's certainly something we can take away and certainly add in terms of some of the key sort of controls that we've got in place, because there is a lot of activity that we do obviously engaging around making sure that we're as inclusive as an organisation as we can be in terms of recruitment and attraction.
Great. Splendid. Stephen, thank you. I think...
Can I just ask one more question? I'm sorry.
Of course you can.
Thank you. Right. So on the theme of inclusion, what's your view on how do you attract candidates for positions from the disabled community? Because a lot of them want to work, are very loyal, will stay longer than their peers. And I was wondering, are you a disability confident employer?
Yeah, we're level 2 in terms of disability confident employer. Right. We're also part of the Greater Manchester Employment Charter, full members of that charter as well. So we do have in place sort of the measures and mechanisms around attracting individuals are disabled, and obviously making sure we put in place the kind of measures and support that individuals from those communities might require to succeed for careers in transport.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. Thank you, Stephen. I'm sure there are 1,000 other questions that we could ask you, and probably will, Stephen. Actually, we might just send them to you on an email. I think
that's absolutely fine. If there's any further information or any other questions you've got, fine today, more than happy to come back and confirm what we're doing across TFN.
Super. Thank you, and thank you, Daniela. I think speaking for other members of the committee, which I don't like to do, but I will do on this occasion, I think that ticks the box, or the boxes that we have in terms of what constitutes a deep dive. I think that was exactly the kind of activity, the exercise, the subject, exactly what we wanted to get into. Different discussion than we had around EV, but that's kind of inevitable, I suppose. Yeah, Grant, thank you. Is there anything else, Daniela, that you wanted to add to that section?
No, that's it from me. Thanks, everyone.
Super, thank you. We've just about given ourselves sufficient time to do justice to accounts and all things audit. So, Paul, over to you, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we're now on to page 43 of the pack that was issued, and apologies for the length of the pack, but we did consider whether to include a link to the accounts, but actually we felt it was more appropriate that the accounts were included. They are a 60 or 70 page document, so all we can say is apologies for that, but at least you've got electronic version. This area is mainly to cover, I suppose, there's two main pieces. One is the annual governance statement, and which represents about a third of the statutory accounts, but it's considered as a separate item because it's about governance of the organisation. the fact that it's captured in the accounts is just the vehicle by which it's published. And then we've got the actual accounts themselves. Now, in terms of the understanding the accounts, we've included the draft accounts, but also at the latter part of the section we include a slide pack which sort of gives a condensed version of how to bring the accounts alive. I live and breathe accounts. Unfortunately, that's my job, but not everyone does, and therefore we feel that picking out the key salient points in a presentation pack, which is what we've done, which we'll hop to in a minute, hopefully will prove to be quite useful to bring everyone up to speed. So this meeting is a chance to introduce members to the accounts, and then at the next meeting, which is in early September, that they would be finalised, hopefully subject to one outstanding area, which is it's always the pension audit. The GMP, the Greater Manchester Pension Fund, has got to have its own audit, and once that audit is completed, the output that we use for our accounts is then deemed to be true and fair and accurate, and therefore we can close our accounts. It's always a matter that's left until it's always late. It's always at the end of our process, but we always get it in place for the board meeting. And the board meeting, I think, Julie, is that the 17th that's been scheduled for? I think so. I think it's the 17th.
The board meeting's the 27th of September. I think Audit and Governance is the 15th and board is the 27th.
Okay. So perhaps if we could just go on to the annual governance statement side, is that again we perform a review of governance separately to the accounts, and but obviously then incorporate the outcome and I suppose the output of that review as part of the annual governance statement within the accounts. But if perhaps it's one that Julie, could you just talk around the AGS for a while?
Yes, thanks, Paul. I think you've probably sort of already covered much of what I might have wanted to say. As you've obviously sort of dealt with the accounting part of it yourself already, and as you say, there are two separate governance processes, but they do have a linkage in terms of the fact that the annual governance statement is a separate governance process, but it then forms part of the accounts. So I think members who were present at the last meeting, and I'm conscious that it wasn't many of you, but those of you who were here will probably recall that we discussed undertaking some more detailed revisions to the annual governance statement from the versions that we've done in previous years, so that basically we update it and we made it more fully relevant to TFN's current position. Because previously we've got quite a lengthy document, it had sort of been tweaked from year to year, but we felt that a more root and branch review of it was probably necessary. So following that, we've done some work to produce the document, which hopefully we think improves the alignment to the Corporate Code of Governance, along with the core principles that it contains, which themselves are based on the SIPFA guidance, which TFN has had in place and has adopted from its outset. So in terms of producing what we've produced and what is with the pack, that's been worked on by the legal and financial teams in liaison with the chair, who we've kept informed on this, to produce, as I say, an updated document with the overall aim of simplifying the output and more closely reflecting the evidence demonstrating a robust governance framework. And it's still in draft form. It's within the part of the papers that you've got today. It's pages 45 to 52 of the statutory accounts themselves, which is pages 90 to 97 of the agenda. So as Paul says, this will ultimately be presented to Audit and Governance in September, on the 15th of September, with the accounts for final approval. But obviously it's open to members today if you have any further comment at this stage, although hopefully, as I say, we'd expected it to sort of more or less be in final form at this stage, but obviously open to your comments. And recommendation 1 of the report invites you to approve the work done on the document to date, subject to any comment and discussion today. So I think that's sort of my introduction to the annual governance statement. I don't know if you want to say anything else, Paul, before.
No. I think if I could just then take over from there, Julie. I think what we'll do is we'll cover the whole accounting and annual governance statement matter, and then perhaps if there's any questions that members have, then please raise them. But we'll just get through. So if I could just maybe hop to if I could ask members to hop to page 105 of their pack, I'll happily share my screen just so we can all share the same pages. If someone can just let me know this has appeared on the screens.
Yeah, got it.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So again, so what this is so preceded this document. There are statutory accounts, the accounts that have been compiled and will be submitted and are subject to audit by Daniel and his team. What we felt was that, again, I've said this before, is that a short presentation of probably the best part of, how many pages is it? It's about 20 pages, but it just really condenses and picks out the key points as we go through. So perhaps if I just walk through the slide pack and again, if people can save questions to the end, that'd be great. So in terms of the statutory accounts, we're set up as by an Act of Parliament, and that's clear in legislation. We compile the accounts in compliance with the CITFA code, and occasionally there is a conflict between accounting and statutory requirements, and where that exists, we adopt the statutory accounting approach, and that you see that in pension accounting and in some absence provisions. We have a statutory duty to open our accounts up for public inspection. So the draft accounts were opened up in accordance with guidance for 30 working days from the 31st of May to the 11th of July, and there were no questions asked or raised by anybody. We have in the past, I think it was about in 2018 or 19, somebody asked for every transaction to be copied, which was a huge amount of work, but fingers crossed we don't get any more requests like that. In terms of the accounts, there are three main sections to it. There's the front third, the middle third, and the back third. The front third is the narrative statement, which kind of brings the whole accounts to life. It kind of explains what we do from a budgeting perspective and a governance perspective, in terms of how we're set up. It also talks a bit about what we did in the year in terms of what the budget was and how we performed against it. And it also then gives a forward look, and it explains what our budgets are going to be. So again, it kind of it presents the financial information over a couple of years, which is very useful, and it also picks out certain key tables. Then the middle third is the real sort of the financial statements. It says they're the statutory accounts, but the statutory accounts is actually the whole lot. But so the middle statement is the real financial statements, which is all the main income and expenditure statements, the balance sheet, the cash flow, and the associated notes that go with it, all designed to meet statutory or CITFA guidance in terms of disclosure. And then the back third is where we capture the annual governance statement that Julie just mentioned before. So whipping down the CIES, which is one of the main financial statements within the middle third of the accounts. It's there to just articulate our income and expenditure in the year. From what members may or may not know is that we don't account for income on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. Because we're fully grant funded, or virtually 99.9% grant funded, there's a small amount of investment income, and we effectively don't grant account on a monthly or quarterly basis. We purely deal with our costs. So we set a cost budget, and then we monitor costs and delivery against that budget on a monthly basis, and then we report on it on a quarterly basis. Occasionally, accounting standards and statutory provisions do vary. The best example of that is the pension accounting. So again, we get a steer from the actuaries as to what the pension accounting would be, and that gets represented in the accounts. It's a way of being consistent across all statements, so we're not down to individual entities deciding on how to disclose. Statute decides how you disclose it, and that's as I've calculated below, the pension provision and the accumulated absences. This is an extract of our CIES statement. The top left-hand box just highlights the fact that we decided to modify how we report. I felt it was a bit confusing, but because of the way that we previously reported, and so what we've done is we modified the way that we report now, and therefore we had to restate the prior year. Essentially, we're now more closely aligning to funding. That's the basis. And if we are 100% grant funded, aligning our expenditure to funding streams, in my mind, makes sense, and I think it starts to be easier to explain. That's that. within the accounts, we reconcile our management accounting position, which is our monthly and quarterly accounting, to the statutory accounts, and that's what this reconciliation is. There's not a huge amount in there. You know, again, it recognises the use of reserves and pension accounting. That's the effect of, and a slight adjustment in relation to accumulated absence provision. The big numbers in our accounts are effectively pension liabilities, but that's recognised within all entities. We are relatively small compared to others. I think other organisations would have numbers that are 10 times, if not 100 times bigger than this. But it is just a result of statutory accounting. That's all it is. So what's important is that there's a triennial valuation of the pension fund, which then formulates the contributions that are made on an annual basis. And we are actually the valuation that was done last time round hasn't changed our contribution levels. So we are contributing at the right level to meet our liabilities. It's the key thing from that. Again, grants accounting is, as I said before, we conduct this once a year in March, where we account for the year for the purposes of the accounts. This just brings to life some of the notes that are in the statutory accounts, just further explaining them. So again, if because these explanations on the right that are in the boxes wouldn't necessarily be in the account. In fact, they won't be in the accounts. So that we just felt it's useful to highlight one or two key areas in there that would be useful for members. So so I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory there. I think interesting there that the contract income down below that's a reimbursement from Network Rail in relation to we provide staff. We provide 2 staff to help the Trans-Pennine route upgrade. Nothing more to add there. That's about our grant arrangements. What members may or may not be aware is that we have an obligation to separate earmarked reserves. So where we receive funding for specific programs, the best example would be the MPR program. That is earmarked for sole use within the MPR program and needs to be designated separately, so it can't be used for anything else. Whereas our core funding that flows into general reserves and therefore could be used to fund activities that are considered to be fall within our powers. So the core grant flows into general reserves, and other grants anything related to MPR becomes an earmarked reserve and solely for the use of an MPR. Balance sheet's fairly straightforward. It's become simpler. I've left line 4. I've left the intangible assets in just so it enables me to explain to people that they've gone. The intangible assets were a result of the smart ticketing program that was in place a number of years ago that was curtailed, and it's taken 2 years for them to fall out of the balance sheet. Last year we had some figures in the left hand column, 31st of March 2022. What you're seeing in our balance sheet now is a lot simpler. Cash of 8.1 million, but that's somewhat inflated because we had the opportunity to take our core grant for this year early. The department asked us to take, I think it was 2.754. I'm a firm believer that if you can get the cash, get it in the bank account and get it earning interest, and so I certainly wouldn't have said no, we can't accommodate that. Any chance to get cash in the door, we do, because it's just grant and it's just early grant. What you're also seeing in relation to other items here is the general decline. So short-term creditors has reduced purely because the level of activity associated to the MPR program has reduced as well. So what you're seeing now is on the right hand column is more akin to what we would expect to see going forward. Big change on pension liabilities is just due to the performance of our assets within the pension fund and the discount factors that apply to that. There's a whole range of activities that could be considered there, and I think one of the things that we talked about previously was possibly bringing somebody from GMPF to the meeting. I can explore that if members would like. Cash flow, just explaining again exactly what it represents and how it aligns back to the balance sheet. So the closing cash of 8.144 at the bottom of the cash flow statement aligns to the cash position in the accounts in the balance sheet. So that effectively gives a whistle-stop tour of the accounts. I'm more than happy to take any questions either at the meeting here or outside the meeting on any matter at all in relation to the accounts, and I kind of would expect there to be some, but I'm also so happy to take questions now. But equally, if members want to ask questions outside, I'm more than happy to do that as well. Any hands up?
Thanks, Paul. Can I just also make members aware of timing? Obviously, there's an awful lot of information contained within both the accounts and within the governance statement, but I would like to be moving on to audit matters at about 2:30, if not before. I don't like to curtail discussion, but I do want to give due time to other elements. But Joanna, over to you.
Okay. Hi. Yes, thank you for that presentation. I've just got a query about how you put the accounts out for public consultation. I'm surprised that given Transport for the North is giving a voice to 15 million in the country, that you didn't get one request for any information. Can I ask, how do you publicise that people can comment on the accounts?
I think there's a statutory requirement that every entity, every local government entity needs to publish their accounts, and that's understood. And now we publish it on the website. That's what we do. I think you know what, I don't know why people don't ask the question, but they don't. You know, I mean, we've had one person who's asked one inquiry that asked for, you know, transactions that were behind. I think the main driver was the MPR program. That was quite political. You know, we don't have that sort of political sensitivity now. So it's I think there are, you know, the access to board papers is probably more forward-looking and more representative. This is it's a backward look. This is a financial representation of what's happened in the year to March 23. You know, in the period between that and now, we're already looking forward, and then the board are considering matters. You know, there's an STP that's been considered and presented. So I just don't think. I think there's better sources of information for people to consider than the statutory accounts.
Okay, well, my comments are, could you not ask each of the local authorities to publish that your accounts are available for inspection on their websites? And could you not put out a tweet about it from your account? Because for 15 million people, I think there's probably a lot of people out there that don't know they've got the right to actually inspect your accounts. And I think we need to try and engage them.
I think this is. I mean, is James actually on the call? Is it James? James is with us or not? He was on the call initially, wasn't he? I think this is a wider question about engagement generally. I think, and I think certainly, I would certainly take on board your thoughts. I mean, what we endeavour to do is to meet our statutory requirements. That's what we do. You know, whether 15 million people understand what our statutory requirement is a completely different question. And I'm happy to sort of take it away and think about it, but you know, I don't quite know how to respond to it actually, really, apart from just perhaps take it away and ponder it.
Challenge and scrutiny is not a bad thing, is it?
No, I thought it was a very good thing.
And it's all right saying, oh, we like meet our statutory responsibilities, but if only going to that line doesn't get you any comments at all, I think to comply with the spirit of your statutory responsibility, not just the letter of it, you perhaps need to think of other ways of sharing the accounts and asking the public what they think. And I think that using social media to do that, and asking local authorities to share this on their websites would be a way forward that wouldn't mean a lot of extra work, but would hopefully reach more of the 15 million people that you represent?
Look, I mean, Joanna, I appreciate your challenge, and I think it's a very good point. I think there's an interesting point at that. So I think certainly, putting something out that publicises it and says, that tweets or a notice. Actually, we do publish a notice. Actually, we have to, but again, that's only within the website. But we could relatively easily and quickly advise people. But again, the next question would be, well, how many people will be on the receiving end of the social media side of it, and does that cover 15 million people or not? And then do you I certainly wouldn't be advocating anything that saw us dropping information to 15 million people.
No, of course not. No,
because that wouldn't be.
And I wouldn't advocate that either. All I'm saying is that we've got 15 million people. Some of those must have an interest and a view on statutory accounts, particularly for organisations that represent them and are giving them one voice in terms of Transport for the North. And I think perhaps we need to try a few other things to actually reach them and get them to perhaps submit 5 or 6 questions about the statutory accounts.
Right, if it's okay, I'll take it away and have a chat to James absolutely. As to how we factor in what we do to a wider engagement strategy. And I think that's the piece that we need to think about. Again, I'm quite cautious of knee-jerk and doing something very isolated in a silo. I think it's how do we fit it into the wider stakeholder engagement strategy. And if that involves just publicising it slightly better, then I'm more than happy to consider that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I think Joanna, that point, and Paul's articulated it as stakeholder engagement, which I guess that's exactly what it is. I think that's a really interesting topic for us to consider at some point in the near future, either as a deep dive topic or because obviously some of that should be articulated through the risk register. But yeah, it is a good topic. Kevin, did you have anything on the accounts or governance statement?
No, I'm comfortable with the accounts and the governance statement within it. The annual governance statement's fine, so I'm okay with that. I just urge perhaps just a little bit of caution on the previous conversation, in that if we've got the 30-day statutory requirement to consult, we just need to be wary of anything that might come back that then pushes us against the deadline for submitting our accounts to board, and then for board to to submit accounts by the national deadline. So we just need to be wary of that, don't we?
Yeah. Okay.
Shirkat, Councillor Hussain, is there anything from your perspective?
No, it's fine. Okay.
Grand. Thank you. I think the governance statement is if we haven't all had the opportunity of reading it, it is an attractive length. I find the narrative in it quite entertaining as well, in terms of it's very descriptive. I think the one comment that I would make about the annual governance statement is that it will always benefit from additional measures, metrics, visibility of actual performance. I think that's undoubtedly the direction of travel that I would encourage it to go into. Not necessarily this iteration, but in future years. And I did promise to make a very quick comment about committee following the interviews that we had for independent members. And one of the points that came up with some consistency was how prospective members viewed assessing performance of committee, the effectiveness of committee work, our view as committee members of how well the committee is actually undertaking the role that's given to it. And I think, again, the annual governance statement will benefit from better insight into committee performance. I'm conscious that ours isn't the only committee. The board oversees a number of committees. And I would ask Paul and Julie whether this is something we can revisit at the meeting in September, just to get a better understanding of where TFN currently is with regard to monitoring and assessing and reporting on committee performance generally, because it may be that other committees do this. I know that Deloitte have a very easy to use, freely available tool on their website, framework from 2021 for audit committees, whether that's something we adopt or consider adopting. But conscious this is part of a wider TFN committee structure. Bless you. Thank you for humouring me on that. Right, so slightly later than expected. Can we move on, please, if everybody's happy to internal audit matters? I think that's the next point on our agenda. So that's Kieran, isn't it?
Yes, thank you very much, Graham. Right, yeah, so just for the benefit of obviously new committee members, in terms of presenting, firstly I'll present a progress paper which includes details of the other reports that I'll be presenting as well. So happy to take comments or questions on the actual reports when we come to that in the presentation, in terms of those individual reports. But firstly, so the papers are at page 123 of the pack. So firstly, we're presenting the progress report, which gives progress against the final reports for the 22-23 internal audit plan, and for the two reports in relation to the 23-24 plan. So it gives an update on the EDI review that we completed, the project management one, which both of those resulted in a reasonable assurance opinion, and then for the 23-24 audit plan, we've presented the IT and remote working asset review, which resulted in a reasonable assurance opinion, and then our follow-up review, which resulted in good progress with 12 out of the 13 actions that we followed up that were either implemented or superseded. We've mentioned here about one change made to the internal audit plan. I believe this, obviously, because the committee's been moved, there's been some changes since then in terms of dates. So the remaining audits for the year, we are working with management to get those in, but obviously that's how it works best around the office move as well in terms of those. So working with management to get those dates confirmed and take those forward. So that is everything for the progress report. I'm happy to take any questions that anyone may have currently. No, okay.
I would encourage you just to canter on, Kieran. That'd be great.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. So first we've got the follow-up report. So this obviously also relates to some of the actions as well, from the EDI and the project management framework audit as well. Sorry, Joanna, do you have a question? Apologies.
No, it was just a quick question. I think it's great you analyse themes across a year. Do you analyse them over a number of years so you can see if those themes are recurring and if there's any measures that can be taken to actually reduce the number of observations in those themes?
Yeah, so certainly what we can do, I suppose, in the next progress report, because obviously this progress report encompasses 2 years, we can include in our themes for the 23-24, but we can also summarise the themes across the 22-23 year and include those, and then obviously we can see that analysis taken forward as the year progresses, and then obviously into future years as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so just a high-level overview, I suppose, for the follow-up report. There was 22 actions are initially included. However, 9 of those were not yet due for completion, so we've excluded them from when we were forming the opinion. So testing identified that 12 out of the 13 actions had been implemented, and the one action that was ongoing, Daniela mentioned around earlier anyway, that's in progress. We've mentioned there, so following presentation of the assurance slides, risk manager will work alongside risk owners for the key corporate risk, which is something that she mentioned earlier, that's in progress. So that's how we've reported it. Any questions in relation to the follow-up report then? No, all good. Okay, in terms of the EDI framework, like I mentioned earlier, that has resulted in a reasonable assurance opinion. So we raised 2 medium actions and 3 low there. As I've already mentioned, in the follow-up audit, we noted that 3 of those had already been implemented, by the time that this committee's come around. So we can see that there's progress been made since the report's been issued. And those actions were really relating to embedding the public sector equality duty within policy considerations. So happy to take any questions on that report if there's any. Oh, okay, thank you. And then moving on down, then we have the framework for project management audit report. So in terms of that has resulted in a reasonable assurance opinion with 2 medium and 5 low actions. So following the issue of a draft report, so the Director of Strategy Analysis and Communications informed us that a task and finish group had now been put into place to deliver and implement the actions that we've raised in this report. So we can see that there's been progress made around that given the change in TFN's operating model. So we can see that progress has been made in terms of that. Are there any questions in relation to this report specifically?
Yeah, I did.
That's fine.
I did share some. Sorry, Karen. I did share a couple of comments with Paul on this, and he's been good enough to respond. But just to share this across the committee, I try not to get overly excited by the grading that's given to an audit report. It can be a very unhelpful thing to focus on, but I was struck by some of the detail in here. Didn't always seem to fit with the grading that had been provided to the report. I think when you read some of the narrative around the individual project controls that simply weren't in place, I was perhaps a little bit surprised that as positive a picture came out of the audit report as it actually did. That was my sort of overriding sense, I guess, was that the absence of control doesn't normally lead you to think that a reasonable assurance picture can be provided. Difficult for me to sort of judge that too much because some of the projects are obviously more significant than others, but it did seem to err on the side of the provision of flexibility. Therefore, we'll accept the fact that things are different one project to another, rather than focusing on the fact that some controls simply weren't present. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, it's interesting this particular audit report, because I think it would have been probably easier if we probably hadn't have included it in the pack. The reason why we need to get the backstory on this one is this was devised probably 2 to 3 years ago, or probably 2 years ago, when we had a full NPR program and actually an IST program. So the need to have a whole program to deal with policy and the various policies that were emerging was deemed to be important and relevant, and a third party was engaged to develop this one. As Stephen mentioned in his part that he talked about before, is the organisation has changed substantially, and the funding reduction and the planned reduction of the NPR programme has meant that we've become a very different organisation. So we've taken this as a good opportunity to revisit that framework, but to take on board the general principles, and the same principles that are in the paper are being adopted where deemed to be applicable. As you said, Graham, it's all about different sizes and different projects, but the task and finish group and actually Daniela's on that group They're working on getting what's fit for purpose. So I think once that task and finish work is done, which will be the end of September, then we'll dry run it in the final quarter. I think we'd probably then get internal audit to look at it again and say, look, does this deliver what was intended in the original paper? So I think it's the sort of the proofs in the pudding at the end of the day. But it's all about getting something that's right for us and works. And I think what was there 2 years ago definitely isn't right. But the essence of what it was saying is still true. That makes some sense, Graham.
You always make sense. Yeah, I do accept, and I'm one of the first to acknowledge the need for something that's fit for purpose, and context is everything. But you can't call something a project if there ain't a project plan, and there are certain principles that are applicable and should be embraced regardless of the spend complexity.
Yeah.
And it's that. So when I was reading the detail of the report to find that we're calling some things projects, but there's no project plan. That grates a little to somebody with a project background, I suppose. But yeah, I get it. Grand. Sorry, Kieran. On you go.
No, thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Okay, so if no more comments related to that report, I'll move on to our, I believe it's the annual summary next. Yeah, so this is just an annual summary for the last year's audit work. So it kind of gives an overview of the actions and the opinions given there. Any questions in relation to that? Assume probably not. No. Okay, that's fine. And then finally, we've got the IT and remote working asset management audit report. I think Danny is on the call as well. So in terms of this audit report, yeah, we've given a reasonable assurance opinion and raised one medium action, two low, and those are really in relation to around updating the policy to ensure consistency, and then ensuring approval of starters and leaver forms. I suppose a bit of background on this, obviously, which we've included within the report, is that obviously the technology manager and head of facilities came into post September 2022. So as part of that, they've reviewed the organisation's asset management policy and also completed a full reconciliation and verification of the assets recorded within the asset management system. We've obviously flagged up that they've identified there's a number of laptops still waiting to be retrieved, but we can see that Danny and the team are obviously doing everything within their power to ensure that the return of those machines as well, and putting in security measures in place to mitigate the risks associated with that. So happy to take any actions, any comments or questions at this time.
Somebody had their hand up. Who had their hand up?
I've got my hand up, Graham.
Sorry, Ken.
Yeah, it's just on that issue, Kieran, the missing laptops. I was unclear from the report whether, because it seems to indicate that it was due to one member of staff leaving, so I wasn't clear whether it was one member of staff with 13 laptops or whether it was 13 leavers with one laptop apiece. So it'd be useful just to clarify that. But it does indicate, doesn't it, that there's a control gap here in terms of the exit of staff from the organisation, and clearly a need to tighten up on some aspects there. And I guess that harks back to our earlier conversation in terms of the deep dive and that recruitment and retention issue. So just some concerns about that, really. I mean, I'm assured by what you've said in terms of the management response, but still a bit, I suppose, a bit concerned that 13 laptops can walk out of an organisation without any control systems to curtail that.
Yeah, Danny, I don't know if you want to provide any additional information in relation to those cases.
Yeah, so there was a number of laptops then. So the previous head of IT, by looking through his archive mailbox, that it was sent out during COVID to various sort of contractors and people working with us, and it looks like we have recovered a number of them, but they were just not asset tracked in the correct way because of the way he sent them to contractors who weren't on our system. He sort of kept notes and emails of stuff that's gone on. He's then left the organisation. There was a lot more than 13 at the time. We have, since going through his archive, we have managed to track down and recover the vast majority. The number is still, it's not where we'd like it to be. We have got a few more leads on things, so it is coming down even more since the audit report. We have since implemented a new asset management system and completely revamped the process since my coming into post. Since then, the tracking is a lot more secure, and we've not had any issues since then.
Yeah, and hopefully that's reflected in the report.
Graham, I think I think Kevin, your point's very valid. Good. I mean, and I think at times, we should, and we've done this, we should put our hand up and say that the things weren't perfect, and they weren't. We don't necessarily know that. I mean, it's interesting, as we're about to clear out the NPR side of the office, we may well, in the process of clearing that out, uncover 2 or 3 laptops. What we do know, though, is that the laptops that we've been unable to locate aren't being used. I think that's a piece of work that Danny and his team have done. So there's a degree of confidence that if someone has got something out there, then I forget exactly how you do that tracking, but anyway, there's a way that you can track, can't you, Danny, that sees whether bits of kit are being used.
So the laptops themselves are encrypted, so no data can be retrieved off the laptops. If anyone tries to access them, they brick. And if anyone from a TFN perspective does log on, we have immediate sort of alerts set up that will have done with some of the ones that were missing. They ping us and lets us know when and where that's been accessed, and we can then get in touch and try to retrieve it.
Yeah. So I think the key thing from my perspective is acknowledging the fact that what we had in place before as a consequence, and a number of key people have gone, wasn't ideal. But what we've focused on is making sure that what we have got going forward is very robust and strong. I think if in a year's time we had a conversation, or 2 years' time, I had a conversation that said there's 10 or 13 or 15 laptops going, I think that would be a very very serious matter. So we are. I'm not diminishing the issue that we had before, but we acknowledge at times things aren't perfect, and what we can do is tighten up.
I just wonder, Paul, whether it might be helpful from this committee's perspective if in the follow-up report that we actually see a bit of that detail. I know we wouldn't normally, it would just say management actions have been implemented or not, but it'd probably be useful to know, how we've fared in terms of that retrieval.
Yeah, no, good point.
Yeah, I mean that's a really helpful reference, I think, Kevin, because I think there is a point of principle here for me. I'm overly concerned about the laptops, particularly given the assurances that Danny's been able to provide. It isn't the laptops that I'm concerned about necessarily. It's the fact that if management are seen to be addressing a known issue, and we don't raise it in the audit report as an action, committee members potentially lose visibility of what's happening with that action. And that's the slight concern for me here. Isn't so much the detail of the asset, isn't necessarily about the nature of the action or what the organisation is doing about it. But as a point of principle, if we see a control failing, then I think personally we should raise it as an action, regardless of whether management are addressing it already or not. Right. The essence of audit is about independent assurance. It's not about whether management has seen something already or not. Now, I think my counsel would be to err on the side of including it in an audit report as an action rather than not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sorry, Graham, just touching on that. I think as Danny mentioned, it was previous controls as well. That's why we've highlighted it, but not raised an action there, just because we can see that Danny and the team are addressing the risk there and trying to capture those.
But thanks for the update as well, Danny. That was very helpful. Right, sorry, Kieran. Thank you.
No, all right. I believe that is yes, I believe that's everything for myself. So thanks for your comments and your questions. If there's nothing else, yeah, that's everything.
Anybody else on the committee? Any members have any questions for Kieran? We'll try not to be quite so short of time, perhaps next time, Kieran. It does actually emphasise the importance associated with actually reading. I know there is a significant amount of work to do simply in terms of digesting the internal audit reports, but it's if we can come to these meetings armed, having read this material, then it's invaluable. Kieran, thank you, much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair.
I think we are now on to sorry, I forgot. Is it Daniel?
Daniel Watson.
Mazars. Sorry, Daniel.
Yep.
Forgive me.
No problem, Chair. Thank you. Given the time, I'll try and keep this as brief as possible, really. I appreciate it's a fairly lengthy document, so I'll just bring out the key points and take the rest of the report as read and take any questions at the end. So this is our audit strategy memorandum, which sets out our intended audit strategy for the 22-23 audit of the financial statements. I suppose the areas I wanted to focus on really were sections 4, 5 and 8 of the report. So section 4 identifies the significant audit risks we've identified during the audit planning phase. On page 214 and 215, we set out those risks. The first is in relation to management override of controls. So this risk sort of takes account of the unique position that management is in to influence the financial position of TFN. What I would say on that is we don't have any specific concerns at TFN that management would do that, but this is a required risk under auditing standards. So I should expect we need to do work on that at every organisation that is audited under international auditing standards. So what we look at there is a sample of journal transactions. Those are the manual transactions that the finance team use to adjust transactions and balances through the accounts. We do that based on risk factors that we identify to make sure we're looking at the higher risk journals, and in particular the ones at year end which could influence that final financial position. And we also look at accounting estimates in the accounts because they are subjective by nature, so they are an area where management could, if they wanted to, influence the financial position as well. The second significant risk we identify is around the valuation of the pension fund liability in your accounts, and that is because it is a big estimate, it's one of the biggest figures in your accounts, and it is subject to a high level of estimation uncertainty, which, I mean, as you can see from the figures there, it swings quite widely between years. So we need to do work to make sure we're satisfied that the assumptions used by your actuary and the methodology used by your actuary is appropriate. What we're not saying at the end of it is this is exactly the figure that is there. We're saying that the actuaries use the proper processes to come up with that figure for your accounts. What I would say is, while there are significant risks for the audit, that doesn't mean we don't do anything on the rest of the accounts. So there is still a lot of work that goes behind testing the other transactions and balancing the accounts. It's just this is where the focus of our audit sits, because these are the areas we deem to be at the highest risk of having a material misstatement in your accounts. The next section I just wanted to touch on is section 5, which is around our work on your value for money arrangements. So you will have seen in 2021 that that was the first year of the new value for money regime, where we issued a value for money commentary at the end of the audit covering your arrangements. This looks at 3 areas in particular, that is financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness, which is around your performance management and how you work with partner organisations. So we've identified one risk in this area, and again, it's not a specific concern, it's taking account of the wider environment in which TFN operates, and that is around financial sustainability. So again, it's not saying we think you're not financially sustainable, it's saying we want to make sure you've got those arrangements in place, particularly around that medium-term financial planning, to make sure you're taking account of everything you should be in producing that medium-term financial plan and identifying any potential gaps before they arise. The final section I just wanted to talk about is section 8 on page 224, which is our materiality levels for the audit, and just to explain in a little bit more detail what they mean. So you'll see in the table there are 4 different amounts there, all in thousands. Just to say, so the first level is the overall materiality level, which is £341,000. That's the level at which, if there was a mistake in the account, and management opted not to change, that would cause us to issue a qualified audit opinion. We wouldn't ever anticipate getting to that stage. We have a good relationship with management, and if there was anything, then I'm sure that would be changed before we got to committee. Performance materiality, which is £273,000, that's the level at which we test everything above that value, and then a sample of below, and that's to make sure that there are no errors below the headline materiality level, which could cumulatively add up to a material error in total. We set a specific materiality level for senior officer remuneration, because that tends to be an area where, when members of the public do read the accounts, it's something they pay particular attention to. So we'd want to make sure that the disclosures around that are correct. So we set a level of £5,000 on that. And then we have a trivial threshold, which is the level at which we would report errors to the Audit and Governance Committee, which is 10,000. So essentially that's to stop us reporting every single rounded error that we'd find in the accounts, and make sure you're just focusing on the main areas that we've identified errors in. I wasn't going to say anything more about the report itself, but just to say that obviously since we drafted this report back in July, the audit has been progressing well, and we are currently on track to report to the next committee meeting in September. Paul said we do anticipate the pensions assurance from the pension fund audits is still being outstanding at that stage, but we should have the rest of the audit substantially complete by that stage, so that there's just one item remaining in the audit completion report. But happy to take any questions on any of the report.
Thanks, Daniel. I went straight to section 6 to look at the fees personally, but nothing to see there really, so I've moved on. Kevin.
Yeah, just a very quick one. In previous years, well, certainly last year, Daniel, you'd flagged a concern, I think, a risk around the level of reserves. But I noticed that seems to have come out in this year's draft. So, has that now been removed? Are you comforted with the current grant position with the organisation and the level of reserve?
So I wouldn't say it's been removed. I think what I've tried to do is just to make the particular value for money side as simple as possible, so it will be picked up in that financial sustainability risk around what's your reserve strategy going forward. And obviously each year Paul's required to assess what the required level of reserves is for the organisation. So we'll be having that conversation about how he's come to that position for 22-23 and how he sees things going forwards as well. So it absolutely is something we will be looking at as part of that risk on value for money.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Daniel.
Anybody else? Any comments on where we are with that? So yeah, we will look ahead to that report, Daniel, at the September meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
So apologies, we have overrun already. I feel like I've let you down in a way. Now I think the final material element on the agenda, Paul, was the operating report. I don't know whether there was anything specific to include on that or not.
No, I'd just say take it as read. If members have questions on it, please then just maybe perhaps send me an email, and we're happy with the rest. The only thing I would add is that we've revised the way that we've done it. That was I forget exactly the length of it, but we've decided as a business we want to shrink that to probably to about 5 to 6 to 8 pages. So we're sharpening up immensely, so it becomes a very useful tool for us and a very useful tool for everybody else. There's a lot of information in there that was there from a legacy perspective, and so we've gone through a process of challenge. And the first quarterly report of this year, which will be to the period to June, you'll see the pack of papers that you see will reduce substantially. One of the reasons being is this report will go from being I think it's 40 pages down to 7 or 8. A lot more condensed, a lot sharper. That's it.
Was there anything else? Date and time of the next meeting, I think. So hopefully everybody's got 15th of September in their calendar. Hopefully everybody is aware that it's an in-person meeting. Is that correct, Julie, in Manchester?
That's correct, Chair. Yes, it's at the Town Hall extension. 11 o'clock start.
Good.
Brilliant. Thank you. Apologies again for being a little tardy. Absolutely delighted to have new members on the committee. So thank you both for your contributions, and look forward to seeing everybody in a few weeks' time in Manchester.